Hello, Jeremy. Yay.
Everyone for being here. Yes, we're super excited for this one. Excited to have everybody here. I know the last event was killer. We're going to keep the ball rolling with that one there. We are super excited to be here for Tuesday, big ol' day one of the Sales Reimagined Revenue Excellence Summit. And today's event is indeed brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. So go ahead,
Woohoo.
go next slide, Pete, and we can talk a little more about Modern Sales Pros
Look what I
before we get into it. We've got the
nice.
gear. Perfect. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and RevOps, and sales enablement, aka our fabulous Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. And if you're not a member yet, you'll be invited to join after the summit. And we would absolutely love to have you so we can keep doing amazing events like these.
Oh, yeah.
So while MSP is great, let's go ahead and talk about our amazing summit sponsors who make it all possible. So kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing organizations are not only sponsoring this event, but full 3 days and 17 events of this summit. So nothing short.
Yeah, I was happy about that sales loft. So now I switched over to, I don't know if it's the dark side or what, but I switched over to our lead investor. But still watching.
A little sales loft action on there, JD. Yeah. Love it.
There you go. To learn more about these innovative companies, go ahead and click on the Sponsor Booths tab at the top of the event page and feel free to check out all the ungated, valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for us exclusively this week. There might also be some fun surprises, I've been told, and giveaways in those booths, so definitely check those out if you want a little extra something there. And with that, we can go ahead and take a look at all of these amazing events I have been mentioning. This is a jam-packed summit. As you can see, we've been telling you all about all the content and the speakers. Here it is all laid out in one place. Whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, or product, there will be content for all of you. So this is the fourth event on Sales Team Masterclass by the one, the only Jeremey Donovan, EVP of Sales and CS at Insight Partners. And if you want to see what we've got going the rest of the days and the rest of the week, visit the agenda tab at the top of the event page to see that full schedule and have it be a bit more accessible. So with all that being said, for today's event, we can go ahead, next slide, perfect. Here's our agenda for the sessions. We'll have a nice introduction and tell you how awesome they all are. We'll get to the content. We'll have some time for a live Q&A, and then we'll wrap at the end with key takeaways. And with that, we'll go to housekeeping, the last one. We also have a chat where I'll be dropping in some links that you don't want to miss, and you can talk there. The more you give, the more you get with these events. Our speakers are here for you, and we know you're here because of them. So that is all I have got for you. Lastly, go ahead.
They're here for Jeremy.
They're here for Jeremy.
I don't know. I think I'm here for you, Pete.
Stop.
Well, we met through MSP, right? So it's a marriage made in heaven.
Sales nerds.
Plenty of coffees and geeking out on books and on revenue and CS.
Do I have your book
sales.
here?
Yeah,
wait, where's your book? I normally have like a pile of your books right here, like one of it's sitting right here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do some introductions here. I'll go first since I'm the less important one. My name is Pete Kazanji. I'm the one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that helps sales managers, so AE SDR, AM, CSM managers use data to improve team performance. That's my current gig. I'm also the founder of Modern Sales Pros that Joni was kind of noting earlier, both of which are kind of like my subsequent act after my last software company, TalentBin, recruiting software company, was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And so my experience at TalentBin was kind of how I got into sales and sales excellence. I went from being a business generalist founder to our first seller, our first sales manager, and then our sales leader at TalentBin. And then when we were acquired by Monster, I went from running a 20-person sales organization to being responsible for new product sales for a 1,000-person sales organization, which is like a little bit of a change there. So I think about sales just a little bit there, and I'm super pumped to have another sales scientist here in the form of Jeremey Donovan, who has a very storied career in sales and sales strategy, sales operations, et cetera, et cetera. I think, Jeremey, you and I met when you were at CB Insights initially, so subsequent to when you were at GLG. So Jared's been around the block. He's an engineer by background, double E, if I recall correctly, right? Electrical engineer by background, and then somehow, accidentally got lost in the sales in the sales pit, and they never let him out. They're like, this guy's really smart. He should hang out here. He worked at Gartner for a long time, at GLG, then kind of jumped into startup land with CB Insights and ran sales strategy there, and then was at SalesLoft for 4 years, 3 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
Yeah,
Awesome,
phenomenal
4
run it's phenomenal run at SalesLoft, which is obviously an amazing sales excellence company. And then now you got a new gig, man. So like I thought I could do the background and just kind of like flex how I know Jeremy's
did the whole
bio
thing
like that back in my hand. But like let's talk about Insight Partners, man.
Super briefly, but I'll say, like, I was thinking about this the other day, that the more well known you get, you just go by your first name, right? I just have to say Cristiano or Cher or whatever, and well, people probably don't know who Cher is anymore, but Brittany, that's still old. I'm trying to think of a modern
Ariana.
Ariana. There you go.
Ariana. Cardi
requires no introduction. Thank you, Janine. I'm watching the chat, so she does know who Cher is. So yeah, after 4 years at SalesLoft in revenue strategy and operations, I switched over to our lead investor, Insight Partners. So just in brief, we manage $90 billion with a B dollars in assets, and we're a venture capital firm and focus on software, 100% software investment. Mm-hmm. And my role here is I'm on a team of people who advise our portfolio companies on their sales and CS strategy. So there's kind of the investment side here, and then there's the operating/advisory side. So I get to see and learn amazing stuff from people at all kinds of companies, from early stage sub 10 million all the way up to hundreds of millions.
What are some of the portfolio companies that people might recognize from Insight? I mean, obviously SalesLoft is like a red letter one there, but like you're saying, from 10 million up to SalesLoft is probably in like $100+ million of ARR or what have you. But what might be some other kind of examples of folks that people might recognize there?
All different sizes, but who else would they know? They would know Showpad in the sales space.
Oh, there you go.
They would know Monday. Monday.com.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, those are some examples. Shopify, Qualtrics.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, little guys, some cute little guys. Smartsheet people probably use. So lots of.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Got it. And so then your organization, your the Sales Excellence Squad. What is the brand? What is the actual term for you guys' team?
We have actually too many terms, but Center of Excellence, I think, is the best way to refer to it.
We got to brand it something different. I like Sales Excellence Squad.
Yeah, I like that too.
SES. You guys can have like, kind of like uniforms, right? It'll be like it's like Marvel Avengers, what have you. So you guys kind of sit in the middle of all of that. And are we talking about like 100 portfolio companies? I mean,
We have over,
I mean, $90 billion is a lot. I don't know how much that like splits up
Yeah, I should
across
get the stats
companies.
exactly right. I want to say it's 400-ish probably portfolio companies. Wow. Yeah. And then constantly, right, we got a lot of capital to invest still. So constantly looking at, exciting new software companies every day, literally every day.
Yeah. So if you're interested in like backing up the truck, you need some capital, just go ahead and email Jeremy. He's got a giant pile in the back. No, just kidding. But I think that puts you in a very unique situation or like your team in a very unique situation where like you sit in between 400 organizations that are generally all B2B sale or like all B2B offerings.
Yeah, there's some B2C, but yeah, it's almost all B2B software. Absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot of B2B. And so like that's a pretty sweet little sample size you got there. And I know that you guys do some kind of like data acquisition across the portfolio. One just for like kind of you guys' own understanding and like benchmarking, kind of making sure that things are like the trains are running on time, et cetera. But like it creates some pretty cool like positive externalities as well, not just least of which is just being able to like geek out on stuff. But maybe you can kind of share how, because I know we're going to talk through some of the benchmarking stuff that you guys have been doing, some things that you guys have been observing in the kind of current market. But maybe you can just talk more broadly around like some of the stuff that you guys do sitting in between these like 400 organizations that are like figuring out B2B sales best practices on their own and then centralizing and then pushing it back out to the portcos.
Yeah, I mean, there's as a data junkie, both qualitative and quantitative, right? We're kind of sitting in the middle of that. So on the quant side, we get data from people, but we also survey them on various things. So comp and quota benchmarks, performance benchmarks, like all up and down the income statement, bookings, ARR, ACV, right? Like KPI bingo, basically. We can
KPI ABCs, inside out, upside down.
And then I think also on the qualitative side, to me, that's some of the interesting stuff. And I think is really the color commentary that, is probably most valuable for you and I to get into as we go through this. Understanding go-to-market strategy, understanding sales process, understanding how do you build and manage pipeline. I was actually, because I think too much about this in my off time, I was thinking about like, if you could have one metric to rule them all, like you could only choose one, what would it be? If you could only choose two, what would it be? This is not planned, so I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think, Pete? Like only one metric, leading or lagging indicator.
Don't worry. Of course I have an answer. Well, like so I can just look at my Atrium kind of like cheat sheet here. We're like, oh, my metrics analysis. I think if I could only choose one, what it would probably be is it would probably be like customer facing meeting volume. And the reason why is, at least for a standard B2B direct sales motion, like the customer facing meeting is like the unit, it's like the fundamental unit of like sales activity. Because like it's like hard to lie about that. Like you could have a bunch of ops and they could be in various stages and their close dates could be XYZ or whatever, but it could all be bullshit unless there's actually like people. So that would be my first. And if I had to choose two, probably the next thing I would do is I would add on to that stage advancements. So like like pipeline at stage advancements. And what I mean by that is because oftentimes like people get very fixated on like forecasting and kind of understanding like what's scheduled to close here or there or whatever, whereas the leading indicator to the forecast is like how the ops are moving along at their various stages. And I know that you did chip manufacturing stuff back in the day, but like when you're running a factory, really like you care less about the stock, you care more about the flow of how things are going. So those would be my two. What would be yours?
I'll answer, but you're just talking about something we were talking about yesterday about stock and flow that even internally and like what's your pipeline, and then how's your pipeline flowing. And one of the things I love to look at, and it's not one of my two, this is I think a more advanced metric, but I love I like to look at days in stage, and then I want to see the percentage of opportunities that are greater than 2x the average days in stage, right? So like if you spend whatever 20 days on average in discovery, and you got a whole bunch of ops that are 40 plus, those are probably starting to smell like old fish, you know, like I think that those kinds of things, that hygiene is critical. Yeah. I was also, again, I'm going to answer, but as you were talking, I was thinking so much about one of my favorite sales books out there, Cracking the Sales Management Code. Jason Jordan and Michelle Vazana probably got that handy too.
It's around here somewhere. So one of my AEs took it.
And they broke down the metrics right into activity metrics, effectiveness metrics, and output or outcome metrics. I'm sure they use slightly different language, but I love that yours are right. And yours are like activity metric. Yep. We didn't plan this, right? But activity.
I just have like goodies all over my desk.
Yeah, activity metrics and effectiveness metrics were your two. Mine are, I guess I'll compliment yours because mine are going to be like more lagging indicators. If I had to choose one, NRR, net retention rate, right? So how much are you growing your existing customer base? That's obviously a little bit more relevant to a middle to late stage company, right? If you're super early stage. And then my second one is like, that's are you growing what you have? But then the other one is pipeline, right? Is how much pipe are you generating? Qualified, right? Qualified pipe. Per, and I might even look at that, you know, per week, because and almost no one sets targets for pipe gen. Like,
they'll do like op creation or new pipe. Well, that actually was the second thing that I kind of cited. This is one of the metrics that we track in HR, or we have out of the box in HR. There's stage advancements, and then there's the number, there's stage, there's what we call pipeline at stage, and which kind of is like a mouthful. But essentially what it is it's looking at like how much pipeline got to stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 in a given time period. It might be depending on the number of reps you have, it might be on a weekly basis. You'd have to have a pretty large sales organization for that to fluctuate much on a weekly basis, but like on a monthly basis, it's one thing to say, hey, here's how many like new ops showed up. Yeah, but they're stage 0, right? Like what I might be interested in is like, okay, cool. Like how much pipe got to stage 3 because like now we're cooking. Right.
Yeah.
And like kind of track that over time. Oh, dude, I totally agree with you. Like that's an extremely important thing. And I think people do less around stages than they ought to. Cause like what you were talking about was like time in stage. And so what people will do is they'll talk about like stuck ops or untouched ops, which are really important from a pipeline hygiene standpoint. But then there's also, if you break it out on stage, like this thing, like something being stuck for like 15 days in a stage that normally is at like 7, that's very worrisome versus saying like, hey, if an op is like stuck for 30 days, like that's problematic. Going on a stage by stage basis can be very valuable there. So
because it's moving along. Yeah. I was going to add one more, which is that people tend not to look at, but I think is super critical around, I don't know, it was not my number 3. I probably would pick one of yours, but I look at the loss rate by stage. And you really want that to look like a cliff. And for organizations where that does not look like a cliff, that means they're not they're not qualifying well. They're not discussed, right. They're just, you need to get
garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. You got it.
Yep, for sure. And this is something that one of the things that we help our customers with is that we have like win rate by stage. And what's interesting is like you end up like you can do that organizationally, which is what you're talking about. Like if an organization has like a leaky down funnel, that's like really worrisome, right? Because it's just like cool. Because like as I was kind of noting earlier, customer facing meeting volume is like the lifeblood of an organization. But if you're like having 3 or 4 or 5 meetings with an op, then it gets to the finish line and it dies. Well, like you just pissed away 5 AE meetings that could have been redirected somewhere else. What's even better is if you can look at that on a per rep basis and be like, ooh, Bobby's got like Bobby has a leaky pipe at the bottom of the funnel. Let's fix that with Bobby. Whereas like, Joey, things fall out of his pipe, mid stage here. And if we can get that tightened up and so on and so forth. So
on your point, I know you're trying to get there, but I can't resist. And this is like Pete and I in a coffee shop. It pretty much goes down exactly like this.
I know. Totally.
Adam in the chat mentioned like keep the sales literature recommendations coming. As you were talking about that, I was actually thinking about Todd Capone, who wrote The Transparency Sale, awesome book. Just there you go. Look at that. Just came out with the Transparent Leader or the Transparency Leader. So I'm
Transparent Sales Leader.
Yeah, so I'm halfway through that book right now.
Of course you are. It might just showed up yesterday.
I know, it just came out. I read them all, and he actually talks just what you were talking about now. He was talking about an example where some company decided their ICP was basically retailers with under $1 billion of revenue. Okay. And Walmart knocks on their door and says, "Hey, we want you to come in and do this XYZ thing for us."
Yikes!
And they should know better, but they go after it, right? And 6
God.
months later, after flying to Bentonville a million times and filling out the RFPs and whatever, January comes around and like one of the key contacts left Walmart, another one got promoted into another job, and the whole thing's dead, and they just wasted tremendous amount of direct capital, but also opportunity cost they could have gone after otherwise.
Yeah,
so
those AEs could have been doing something better. Yeah, I am super pumped. Now you're making me go on a tangent. So we are going to get to your benchmark stuff here. Damn it, if it's the last thing I do. But I think one of the things that I'm really stoked on, because we think about this at Atrium quite a bit, is helping managers be more successful, helping leaders be more successful. Because the historic investment in whether it's enablement or kind of tooling has been more rep focused, right? Where we're talking about sales engagement solutions like SalesLoft or really helpful note-taking software, kind of workflow software like Scratchpad, or even the reality is even things like Gong and Chorus and what have you are they've historically been very rep focused because it's very helpful for this thing to take notes for you, etc. And so I'm really enjoying how much more literature there is coming out on sales management and sales leadership. So obviously, Jeremy has a book called Leading Sales Development that he wrote with Aaliyah Homason. We've probably given out 5,000 of those to prospects and customers. It's that, and then Trish Bertuzzi's Sales Development, and then David Delaney's Sales Development Framework are all really fantastic. And then of course, Michelle Vezana and Jason Jordan wrote Cracking the Sales Management Code, but then Michelle wrote
Crushing Quota after that, which is awesome.
Exactly. Crushing Quota is more so Cracking the Sales Management Code is more the nuts and bolts of the measurement and the analytics, whereas Crushing Quota is more okay, what are you going to do about this? As a manager, as a data-driven manager, what are you going to do about it? Because you got to it's all well and good for the nerds to hang out and look at charts and opine on it. What we have to do is we have to change rep behavior, because that's what actually makes the business better, is by identifying the issues in the rep and then kind of fixing it accordingly. And so Todd's new book, The Transparent Sales Leader, I'm really stoked on, even though I'm completely unsurprised that Jeremy is halfway through it already. I'm pumped to read it because his transparency sale was very tactically focused around how to be transparent in your sales process and how to drive alignment with you and the customer. And it's fantastic, of course. And the transparency sales leader is talking about how you can do that internally as a management. Wonderful. So before we chew up all of our time, Jeremy, I know that you guys have, we kind of we talked about how you guys sit in the middle of these 400 customers. Customers. I guess they are customers. 400 portfolio companies.
Of them as customers also. Yeah,
exactly. And you guys have this amazing data set here. And so I know that you kind of did a research project recently where you kind of went through some things there. Maybe what we can do is kind of talk through a couple of these slides and kind of just comment on them, and then we have some Atrium benchmarking at the end of the presentation here. So with that, I'll kind of pass it over to you.
Yeah, this one's probably the quickest one because, and this is a lagging indicator, right? It's your ARR growth rate. I think for reps and for leaders, it's a good way to think about benchmark and best practice, right? And there's a difference there, right? Benchmark is the average of what folks are doing. Best practice is the best, obviously, of what they're doing. And here it's sort of, look at your company, see where you're at. And, if you're a $15 million company, but you're and you're celebrating growing at 15%, maybe you should, 50%, maybe you shouldn't be celebrating, right? you're kind of at the bottom of that range for
Right.
where you might be growing. So I think that this is really about understanding, a little bit of something that everyone already knows, right? Which is the law of diminishing marginal returns, or the
Sure.
fact that it's harder to scale as you get bigger and bigger.
Right. And so what we got here on the x-axis is we got the kind of current ARR of an organization. So $0 to $10 million, $10 to $20 million, $20 to $50 million, 50 to 100, and then 100 plus. And then we've got the median here on annual growth rate there, which is really kind of funny if you think about it, because obviously 0 through 10 is like a pretty wide swath. And you were noting earlier, like, yeah, you guys have some fairly later stage organizations. I kind of like live more in the 0 to 10, 0 to 20 range, but it's kind of remarkable to see that 130 there, because historically the VC mantra is like triple double, like, or sorry, well, it was triple double double, then it was like, and then for a hot second it was like, well, maybe we could like triple 3 times. Right.
Yeah,
And
maybe not this year.
Yeah. Well, and
But
then,
there
but
are
like, look at this, like 130% is like I don't know, it's like a 2 point, what is that, like 2.5x or 2.3x on across that. So it's like not quite the like, oh, you got to triple or else like you're like dog food, right?
Well, VCs, VCs do have the returns are not normally distributed, right? Like, you have one Facebook, or you have one, Amazon or Google or whatever, right? And that pays for all the other folks. It is, that's one of the cool things in the job is seeing some of these companies who are growing, like, that upward bound 300%. And when you're growing at that rate, we're talking about managing and scaling, high performance sales teams here. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned and was a benefit from my time at SalesLoft was how important capacity planning is when you're growing that fast, right? So you need to be, sharpen your pencil and figure out, like, if I'm growing 200%, I need to have this many AEs. I need to have this many CSMs. I need to have this much onboarding capacity. I need to have this many sales engineers. I need to have blah, 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 right? One of the portcos we're advising right now, like, they're actually in the B2C space, and they were growing, like, they were selling faster than they could actually serve.
Service,
and when we invested in them, and then that we hopped in and said, hey, you got to build a capacity planning model. So I think that's also one of the takeaways from this is, like, to sustain that. It's not just how fast you're growing; it's to be able to sustain that, the investments that you need to make in all sales go-to-market functions, and then also evolving your funnel, right? Like, you may early on benefit from, if you're lucky, like a ton of inbound.
Yeah, exactly.
And then eventually you need to ramp up the outbound muscle.
Right, because like the law of diminishing returns, higher and higher hanging fruit, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things I like to say is, like, sailing is all well and good, but like, let's not depend on the wind here. Like, steam power is useful. Let's make sure that we can go outbound, and obviously, wonderful solutions like SalesLoft and other sales engagement solutions kind of help with us and help with that. Plus, like, really helpful database software. It's like, Zoom Info and kind of others that allow us to kind of like find our ICP targets and go out and grab them. Yeah. I mean, I think that the capacity planning thing is something that's really important, and oftentimes people miss. We Atrium's at 15 account executives right now, and we were growing very substantially from a AE hiring standpoint. And one of the things that I was constantly KPI'd on was those hires, but like, really what you needed to do is just like make sure, like, it's just its own subcomponent, right? Its own sub process in the larger factory. And so the same way that, like, if you don't have opportunity, like if you don't have new opportunity inflow going through those different stages that they're trying to close one deals, like, you won't hit your revenue targets. Moreover, the funnel ahead of the funnel is if you aren't having enough, like, first meetings with reps, if you don't have enough applications that are coming in, et cetera, like, you're going to get behind the 8 ball on your hiring. And one of the things that I talk about with with marketing leaders quite a bit is like you can't make pipeline that isn't owned by a rep. Like if
Right.
if like an empty seat at a desk can't like catch ops, right? So
Yeah.
instead, what you'll end up doing is like you'll just end up overloading your existing AEs, who will of course then like drop balls on the
Yeah.
ground, et cetera. So like it really requires a bunch of alignment and kind of like moving together as like
So
as a system.
so many lessons are going through my like lessons learned. Some of them the hard way are going through my head. Some
Mm-hmm.
some not so. The one I'll give credit to one of the Rev Ops leaders that I worked with at SalesLoft, Jason Moore. He built out a capacity plan to the human, right? Like literally
Yeah.
to the human, and
Yep.
including the to be hireds. And one of the really smart things that he did was to be super realistic about ramp, right? Like
Exactly.
if you're amateur about the capacity plan, you basically say like, oh, I hired a rep and their quota is whatever, $800,000 of new business, and then boom, like from day one, they just start to linearly,
Right,
bring
and
that.
then and like 800 divided by 12, and then 30
Yeah,
days in, they're they're doing 60K bookings. Yeah, that's
and
how it
I,
works.
there's a huge difference, I think, also between like if you ask somebody like, "What's your ramp time?" and they say, "Oh, our ramp is 3 months or whatever," but what they're really talking about is when the enablement people stop
Training.
onboarding, right? Stop
Yep.
training or shift into ongoing training mode. But in
Yep.
reality, like here's an SDR stat that I remember doing, in my past role. So I looked and I said, "How many ops?" Here's a quiz for you, Pete. All right, you probably know
Oh
this
god.
from your data, but um, how many incremental ops does an SDR build per month? So what I mean is like in month one they generate,
Whatever.
X number of ops and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Month two,
Yeah, I think that we actually do a master class on this on I forget the name. It was like data driven ramping or something like that. And like the thing that really messes people's brains up, like humans really like generally speaking, humans suck at math, myself included. And like computers are great at math. And the other thing that humans really suck at is they suck at like time offsets.
mm,
And when like something enters versus when something comes out. And so this is why like AE ramping is so hard for people to comprehend. SDR is a little bit easier because you have to think about like when the thing enters the factory, right? And
yeah,
it gets worked on, and then like something pops out the end. And so at least in SDR land, depending on your sales motion, like if it's an enterprise sales motion, like you got to warm up an account for probably like I don't know, like 30, 60, maybe 90 days. Like there's a
for sure.
sales cycle on the account to even get an op open, right? So I would imagine like you're probably like, I mean, like in our SDRs, like I think they onboard for about a month. We have like a mid-market sales motion. Our deal cycle is like 60 days, et cetera.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
pretty velocity. Our SDRs start popping ops out in like the second half of like month two.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's not like full capacity, right? It's like they're
No
starting
way.
to
Yeah.
get yeah.
So crunching the data right from the anonymized data of the companies that we had at SalesLoft, we found basically SDRs would add one op incrementally per month for the first 6 months, and then a half an op after that. So month one, month two, month three, right? So by month six, they were doing six ops, and then by month seven, it was like 6.5, 7, right? So
Oh,
they're ramping slowly. And
yeah,
right, if you take to your other point about an enterprise, if you hire an enterprise rep, like they might put up a big donut for 12 months.
totally.
Right?
Yeah,
It's unless
yeah.
they get
The
handed
the
something.
yeah, maybe Joni can grab the link to that data driven ramping event because it's I'm pretty proud of it. I like it. It's good content if you
Yeah.
will. But yeah, I think that ends up being something that people really don't understand as well. Is like, I mean, the good rule of thumb is like it should take 2 deal cycles, right,
Mm,
before someone's like getting pretty productive. Because even if somebody like in their first, say after their first month, they actually start accepting ops. Well, now you're
mhm.
at your minimum a deal cycle away from something, right? And then moreover, that rep probably sucks at what they're
Yeah.
doing. Like, so like their win rate from stage, again, remember, right? We were talking about from stage, like their win rate from stage for those early ops that are going to come into their pipe is probably going to be terrible, right? They're going to have like, they're going to fumble a lot of stuff, and so this is why one of the things that ramping ends up being a pretty critical use case for customers using Atrium, is one, like tracking like the volume of things like that op build and making sure that they're
Mhm.
kind of in line with other folks who have ramped before. And then of course like lagging it, like intermediary indicators, so like it's all well and good that like your meeting volume and your op volume are ramping, but what about those stage advancements? Like, hey, you got a bunch of ops that are coming in pipe, is anything getting to stage 3, or just like is it all just like going right back out again? That ends up being very important, but also the efficiency metrics end up being really important too, because somebody's stage advancement, like their batting average should get
Yeah.
better on an incremental basis. So the SDR
Oh,
version
yeah.
of that is like email response rate, or kind of like conversion rates on like connects to books and
We
what
looked at
have you. So like those are important to
Yeah,
measure.
we looked at that too, and newly hired reps, it could take them 400 plus five, maybe 400 or 500 activities to generate a qualified op, right?
Yeah,
Phone, email, social, whatever. But after whatever 6 months, a year, I mean,
then
there's
it's
definite learning
300.
curve, and they can get to 100. I
Yeah.
saw reps with like 80 to 100 activities per op. So
Yep.
it's just there is an incredible learning curve. It's always killed me that AEs hop around so much, because
I know.
they have to, for their own earnings, they have to reset. They really don't get productive until 2+ years.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it is an interesting, like, yeah, I guess there's a meta question there around like how to alleviate that. But yeah, it's just like, man, you only just started getting good. Like, what's the deal here, right? And then
Yeah,
that's really important for sellers, like whether you're talking about SDRs or AEs, is just like honing their craft. Because that's the other thing too, is like once you get good at the subject matter, like let's use Atrium as an example, right? So like all our sales reps sell to sales leaders, sales operations folks, sales development leaders, et cetera, et cetera. So like, in the first like 30, 60, 90 days, like they're learning how to talk manager, they're learning how to talk leader, like, because I'm crazy. We have a very rigorous onboarding process with lots of curriculum and documentation and recordings and what have you, and quizzing and authentication and blah, 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 blah. But still, like it takes you a while to get good at that stuff, because then once you get good and you kind of become like, what is it called? Unawarely good, right?
yeah,
At the
yeah,
subject
yeah.
matter, right? Like the
Unconsciously competent.
unconscious, thank you. I knew you would know, Jer. Once you become unconsciously competent at the subject matter, well, now you can start working on the things that you are not good at, like the sales behaviors, right? Like
Mm.
making sure that you're doing a good job of like open-ended questions and trial closing, and kind of like managing communication and all those sort of things. If like you're struggling with just the subject matter, right, like there's no way that you're going to be able to like improve those behaviors, because like you're
Yeah,
fumbling around on like, oh well, they said this objection and I'm confused about the product, and so on and so forth, right? So you can really only start advancing your craft as a seller once you have facility
yeah.
with the subject matter. And so like bailing after like 12 months or 18 months really kind of like
On
kind of
on a relate
hurts
on
you
a
there.
related matter, because this conversation really is bridging reps and leadership and managers. I have a very strongly held view that first line sales managers should should be promoted from within. Period.
Hmm.
Second line and beyond, like 50-50 internal external, I'm
Sure.
totally cool with that. But and I say that for precisely the reason you just brought up, which is, if I've
Right.
seen too many first line sales managers who are hired from the outside, and since they don't know the product, they
Subject
don't
matter.
know the organization, they don't know the processes, like they can't actually coach effectively. And what they end up falling back on is they exclusively start focusing on activity, and they drive their reps freaking crazy. Um, and
Right,
and
versus
and
the
they're just not
quality.
as
More
efficient.
quantity, more quantity, more quantity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
They
sure.
don't know how to coach.
All right. Well, I'm going to
Love
skip
that.
our S&M's expense here, but I want to talk about this guy, because you were talking about NRR earlier, and I think that this is a really interesting slide here around, the satisfaction that organizations or that like products deliver versus the net revenue retention here. Maybe you can kind of talk folks through what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So I'll explain the axes first because I think you did a good job of that on the other one, which I had forgotten to do. So x-axis here is net promoter score. So net promoter score is that question: would you recommend XYZ product to a friend or a colleague? It's technically on a 0 to 10 scale. A 9 or a 10 is a promoter. A 7 or an 8 is a neutral, and then a 0 to a 6 is a detractor. So you take basically the percentage of promoters, subtract the percentage of detractors. So you can go from plus 100 to minus 100 if you had 100% detractors, 100% promoters.
Right.
Y-axis here is NRR, right? So I think we put the NRR at like the average benchmark average here on that's what our x-axis is. But here, what you're looking for is this ultimate question, right? Is there which sidebar is the name of the book that is the originator of NPS, Fred Reichard, is actually called the Ultimate Question book. But the ultimate question in this context is our NRR and NPS correlated? And kinda, yeah.
Kinda. Like it's not like this. Right? It's like, I want to know who that is at the negative 20 NPS with 160% net revenue retention. Like that's that one's like something crazy there.
And he found basically like the O-ring doesn't survive below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, right? It would crack. The old O-ring on the shuttle would crack, and liquid rocket fuel escape through there. So I'm always looking for like this tipping point thing, using another metaphor.
Right.
So if you were to nudge that x-axis line down to 100, what you basically see, what I'm seeing there is like, if your NPS is above, let's say 40, like you're in pretty good zone, right?
Yeah, that's where it starts. That's where it starts inflecting up.
Yeah. So like this is the bad news, is if you're under 40, you're not guaranteed, right, to have bad things happen. But I don't want to be, right? Like, I don't want to be in that zone. And there is a lot of enterprise software, and you can see it. I mean, these are all like software companies, right? Like, this is a sample of enterprise software. So there's a good percentage of enterprise software companies in general that are below 40. So that's a risky zone to be in.
Yeah, I love it. Wonderful. Let's talk about sales motions a little bit here. And this is kind of like a rundown of ASP and kind of like primary sales motion here. Maybe you can unpack this a little bit for folks.
Yeah, so you can see the ASP ranges. The top on the stack there is field sales, the middle is inside, the bottom is hybrid of their motion. Yep. I think not a huge surprise, right, that it becomes more field as you get bigger. But this was done, right? Like, this was done a kind of a few months back. So this is still COVID kind of, it's still out there. And yet, despite that, you do see still a very high percentage of field sales in enterprise selling. And that, to me, is the people tend to overestimate the impact of events, right? And everybody was running, the pundits, were running around saying it's the end of field sales, right? Field sales is dead. No, it's alive and well. I think what happens over time, when I started my career decades ago now, the threshold for field sales was around 20K. Like, if you were under 20K, you did inside. If you were over 20, you did field. Sure. And that's just nudged up over time, basically.
Yep. So, and I think that, a couple of things there, especially as we've gone and done more and more, started to do like more field marketing events, kind of like customer love events and things like that. I think that people really have a tendency to underappreciate the utility of the utility of like face-to-face interaction, not just from a relationship formation standpoint, but like as sellers, really like what we're we're professional communicators, and really like your ability to communicate, not just express, but also to consume, right? An index off of what's in front of you or what have you, is is really quite different when you're face to face. There are obviously things like Zoom and I don't know, Goldcast, because this is a marketing solution but not a sales solution, have really helped with that, versus kind of like phone sales where you're kind of like not face to face, even if it's digital, right?
Mhm.
And you're kind of like talking to a black box or what have you. But even like being live, you can, the communication and kind of like you're actually hearing what they're saying, and like you're picking up on kind of like body language things and what have you. It really is, it's something that I guess the thing that I described to somebody the other day, when someone's like, man, these like face-to-face events are like really great. It's like, yeah, it's kind of hard to like mess with like 500,000 years of evolution, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah. There's also, right, there's a signaling that happens. It's cause and effect, right? But if you're willing to take the time to meet with somebody face to
yeah,
face, then you're already more engaged. But then once you meet with them, you're building trust, you're building rapport.
yep,
You're right. You're picking up on the verbal and nonverbal contextual cues, right?
hmm
And I mean, I gotta say, there's something to breaking bread, right, with
hmm
people. One of the most useful things we did when back at Sales Loft was on our event marketing was very intimate.
yep,
We would do dinners for like 10 to 12 people,
yep,
really nice place, no pitching. Like we didn't stand up and say a word. We just did a 50-50 thing where we had prospects sit next to clients,
yep,
and we're super intentional about seating assignments so that we sat near peers together,
yep, yep,
and let your clients sell for you. And
yep,
if the product is solid, then that's what's going to happen. So I think companies they always want to do scale, right? Scale.
yep.
One of the smartest things that my CEO at GLG said, I love this quote. I didn't understand it the first time he said it. He said, "You can't scale suck." And I had to ask him, I didn't get it. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, everyone's always kills ideas because they say, but that doesn't scale. And
Right.
his counter to that is you can't scale suck. And sometimes you have to do something at a low scale, high effectiveness,
Mhm.
sort of in that quadrant. And I think those intimate like dinners, um, those intimate dinners really do it. I hate steakhouses sidebar because I think that's great. Like, I
I'm
think you
just
got
I'm reminded of this, you and I had this conversation about mutual plan software. So SalesLoft put on, this might have been a little bit bigger than the typical one, a dinner at the Slanted Door at the Ferry Building in San
Mhm.
Francisco.
I remember
And it
that
was
one. Yeah.
yeah, it was a fantastic event. And we're like, people just have like really good, like you meet your people, et cetera. I mean, this is something why like MSP, even though like now most of the stuff that we do is digital, although there are 3 events that are happening in San Francisco, Austin, and New York on Thursday. Let me look at my calendar. Yeah, on Thursday. Yeah, the Modern Sales Pros salons, right? They were just like a revenue, sales operations, sales leadership, et cetera, kind of like roundtable, like for lack of a better word, kind of like a stitch and bitch,
Mhm.
where you kind of like hang out, like you have a couple beers, have a glass of wine or whatever, talk with your colleagues, and talk about like whatever the topic is. And I think that the same, like it was funny, the CEO of Outreach, Manny Medina, what was talking with me about this after one of our events. He's like, "Oh my god, that was like a scaled discovery session. It was like 100. It was like 100 people engaging in like like 15 concurrent discovery conversations." But I think like having a disco session side by side with somebody, they're going to be a lot more honest. They're going to be a lot like more candid. Now, as a virtual seller, you can. This is one of the things that I challenge my sellers to do. I call it like turbo rapport. Like how
Mhm.
quickly can you become friends with somebody, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like get down on like your starting blocks, right? And like bust it. Like if you're talking about weather, you've already failed, right? Versus
Yeah.
like showing up to the meeting with like a very specific point of view about like what your ice break, your number 1 ice break, your number 2 ice break, your number 3 ice break is. Because if you can bolt out of the gate in the
Yeah.
first like 3 or 5 minutes, then you've earned the right for like a good discovery conversation. Now, of course, doing that live over dinner or drinks, probably a little bit easier, but you can do it in a virtual way if you are intentional and like
I think,
and
yeah, you
bust
definitely can.
out of the
And
blocks.
I don't know if it was Chris Orlob or Devin Reed right over at Gong put out research that showed that when video's on versus video off,
Oh yeah,
there's far more likelihood of closing an op. if you swear, actually it was
Yeah.
if the client swears,
If they
actually
do,
is what it was.
if they do,
If
Yep.
they swear, then
They're
you're much more
comfortable.
likely to win the deal. I thought those were like awesome stats. One of the sales folks I work with in my prior employer, his name is Tom Bridge, one of the smartest salespeople I've ever met, and super successful seller. It wasn't a manipulation thing. He brought his dog to work. He was our work dog. And when the dog would, when the dog would appear in the background, right? Like that,
Oh,
I think these things are subtle.
Zoom.
Like they build trust. You get to know people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. That's so funny about that. Yeah. I mean, and I think that you do see this with some of the work from home stuff. And like as a seller, you can do a good job of like catching on, like hooking onto things in the background and kind of being thoughtful about that. I think the other thing that you can do too is like, and I know on this slide it talks about hybrid selling. There's like getting on a plane, right? Like you don't always have to be on a plane, but there can be situations wherein getting on the plane can be important. It's like, some proportion of your week could be, this like Zoom behavior. And then when something's getting like it's actually at both ends of the funnel, like either
Yeah.
opening can be a lot easier live. So like, hey, I'm going to be in town. Like I'm filling up my calendar. Love to meet up, et cetera. It's like, let's grab drinks, let's grab coffee, whatever. Oh, okay. Well, like Pete's going to be in town. So like, okay. And then like in that regard, you can open, very efficiently and then closing as well. But in the middle, you might be able to maintain that in a more digital kind of capacity.
Yeah.
And then in so doing, the nice thing about hybrid or the nice thing about inside is that you can be having 3, 4, 5 meetings a day, as opposed to if you're pure field, like you're lucky if you're getting 2 done. Right.
Yeah. It's like, it's way more efficient, but but how do you measure success, right? Like if you measure success in the number of meetings you have, great. But what if those meetings don't convert?
Yeah, it's got to be both. It's got to be the quantity and the quality, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So like last benchmark slide here from the vaunted Insight Sales Excellence Squad, TM.
Love it. Love it.
So this is kind of talking about ASP versus deal cycle. You want to take us through this?
Yeah, it's also just to give people a baseline, right? It's how long do sales cycles take as a function of your ASP, and I think especially you all very often hear about companies saying, "Hey, I want to move up market," right? Like I want to move to enterprise, and I think probably the most jarring thing that they need to prepare for is just to be is the true patience required.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at, whatever, even let's say you go in order of magnitude, right? So you go 10K deal, you're looking at 30-ish days, right? You do a 100K deal, you're looking at 6 months. We don't even show $1 million deals here. I mean, we've got a few portfolio companies who do 10, 20 plus $1 million deals.
Wow.
Those deals take years to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just to be realistic, I think, about, where you are. I mean, and you also this also tells you like, hey, if you're, I don't know, I guess I want to be that company who does $350,000 deals in 1 month, but
That's not that's a typo. There's no way that's true. There's no way that's true.
It's or
They're
they haven't done
robbers.
that yet,
They're bank
right?
robbers.
Yeah, you don't want to be in the lower right here, I think, is the point.
Yeah, 100%. That's crazy. And it's interesting that like, you have transactional versus solution versus consultative. I wonder what are the definitions associated, because like people kind of like bandy these phrases around.
Yeah.
I wonder what the I wonder what the actual definitions are, at least as kind of defined here.
In this context, we just labeled them based on deal size. I mean,
Sure.
I think there's different ways, right? You could do it based on deal size. You could also do it based on sales cycle, right? I think those are perfectly, and there is no hard and fast definition. But in this context, it was just deal size.
Yeah, I like it.
And
go ahead.
Even solution versus consultative, like I just think those are convenient terms.
Sure. Okay. These are just labels that we threw on there.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I know that we're running up on time here, so I wanted to share a little bit of like some benchmarking information. So what we did to kind of like make this fun and kind of like data centric, in addition to Jeremy bringing some marbles to play with, we brought our own bag of marbles where we essentially looked across Atrium's got nearly 300 customers right now across like a variety of different markets and what have you. And so what we just did was we just did some kind of like anonymized benchmarking around just kind of like activity volumes and kind of like, I mean, we did a much like more holistic kind of like benchmarking exercise, and then we kind of like rolled up some of it here. One of the things that we kind of saw just kind of across enterprise, mid-market, and SMB teams, kind of to our point earlier about about effectiveness, or sorry, like efficiency of reps and and kind of activity levels. What we actually saw across all these organizations was like the average number of like customer facing meetings was only 34. Which is, if you divide that out by 4 on a weekly basis, that's just 8.5 meetings, which is fascinating to me because like my reaction to that is like, oh my gosh, if like my reps are not having like 15 customer facing meetings a week, I'm like, what the hell is
It's
going
like a
on here?
meeting or two a day, right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
like my reaction to that is like, what? But I think it just kind of goes to show you. And now, of course, this is blended across, like we have a mid-market motion, but it's blended across mid-market, SMB, and enterprise. But I think what this kind of points to is that a lot of organizations could be a lot more efficient than they actually are. And I was, this reminds me of a conversation I was having with the CEO of Clary earlier today around like, first, in order to understand that like you might have a shortfall, they call it like a revenue leak in from an organizational standpoint. But in this case, if it's like, hey man, as you just kind of said, like, wow, that's like barely a meeting and a half per day. It's like, yeah. What are you doing with the other 8 hours in that day? Right? Or if you're having 8 customer facing meetings a week, and say there's like a half hour prep beforehand and a half hour prep afterwards, right? So like, call that 16 hours of a 40-hour week. Like, what are you doing
Yeah.
with the other 25 hours of the week there?
It's a pretty timeless stat, by the way. Alexander Group, periodically publishes that. I think the active engaged selling time for reps is around 35%. So this
Yeah.
totally gels with that.
Yeah, and I think you can get that. I mean, like I would lose my mind if my reps were like that low activity. But I think that just kind of goes to show how much like you could lever up your organization. Kind of other things that were kind of being called out here. The average number of new biz ops that reps are working at any given point in time is right around 40. Again, that blends
That's
pretty
a
heavily.
lot. That
Yeah.
strikes me as a lot.
Well, I mean, I think that the I think what this actually what might be an interesting kind of incremental cut on this might be the active, like what is actually being worked versus like what's in pipe and like maybe inactive and is like a pipeline hygiene problem. And then related to that is the number of like new op inflow that's happening. At least we saw across these hundreds of customers was around 18 or so. When you get up into the larger organizations, the larger kind of like sales organizations, or sorry, the larger sales motions, that kind of attenuates a little bit there. Now, this is enterprise as kind of like tagged in Atrium. Like Atrium has a concept of like you tag your team as like SMB versus commercial versus mid-market, whatever. So we haven't done the kind of further analysis to then just like bucket this by ASP, because you might say like, wow, a given enterprise rep probably is only working like 5 or 10 ops. Yeah, that might be the many hundred, like that's an enterprise rep up here in the like hundreds of thousands versus an enterprise rep that maybe is selling 50 or 100,000 deals there. So yeah, we're going to do more kind of like chewing up of this and kind of analysis on this and kind of publishing of this data on a go forward basis. But when we did this benchmarking, we were really surprised by kind of like the low activity levels there, especially as compared to some of the best organizations that we work with, and also like our sales organization. We're pretty surprised there. I think it just goes to show you that there's a lot more efficiency that can be driven out of a lot of sales organizations. Any other kind of reactions here?
No, my main reaction was, I think that, those numbers of meetings, active selling time meetings, I think right on. I'm a little surprised by the size of the, ops managed and new ops generated, but yeah, it depends so much on the deal size. So again, these things are all, benchmark versus best practice for your org. I guess if I had a final thought, it's basically like establish the metrics that matter to pull this full circle, like where we started this conversation. set targets for those, and work to optimize them for your organization. That's the key.
Yeah, for sure. With the help of the Sales Excellence Squad, right, Jer?
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Exactly.
That's right. Because non-insight portfolio companies can they can throw the bat signal up, and you guys will descend on them, right? Or do
Does not
you have
happen
to
that way,
take, does
unfortunately.
not, oh, really? Okay, so you have to take insight money in order to get the Sales Excellence Squad. I get it. All right, wonderful. Well, I think that we have our kind of key takeaways right now. I mean, there's so much stuff that we covered here. I think I'm not going to try to recap it all, but I think the net here is that being thoughtful around like the data as that kind of drives your organization, and how you can make your organization better by looking at benchmarks versus best practices is something that's really, really impactful there. Joni, is there anything that you wanted to cover here?
I think you guys nailed it. The last few notes that we have for you all before you head to the next event is just that we have a couple more days coming after this. Obviously, this was an amazing chat for all of us. We're excited to get you that recording by the end of the day so that you can share it around, rewatch if you're real in there. And that's about all. Thank you so much, Jeremy, and thank you, Pete, for being here today. We appreciate it. And for those of you still here, we do indeed have a panel up next, and that is the RevOps Revolution from Tactical to Strategic, and that is going live right now. So go ahead, head over.